Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on our YouTube Live from NYU Grossman School of Medicine. We're coming to you through the Center for the Investigation of Environmental Hazards from an NIEHS, National Institute of Environmental Health Science, sponsored program that we have. And as you know, we're here. We try to come to your living rooms or your office space once a month and talk to you about environmental health issues that the communities and we all need to know about, hot topics, emerging topics. And we will be continuing these environmental health chats, or snippets as we call them, for the future. And we invite you to join us and to look for the advertisements that we send out for an every month session. We're hoping next month to have a chat from our vaccine, the NYU Vaccine Institute in Brooklyn, who will talk about, who will continue talking to us about vaccines. But for now, we're going to get started with another guest from NYU Grossman School of Medicine. This is Dr. Akgar Gasabian. She is both a physician and a PhD, and she's an investigator and assistant professor in the Department of Pediatrics, Population Health, and my own environmental medicine department, again, at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine. She has many, many research interests in environmental exposures, and one that she's focused upon recently are studies on the effects of thyroid hormones on fetal brain development. And she's very active in the area of pregnancy and fetal development associated with different endocrine disrupting compounds. And if you're all looking at each other and saying, what are endocrine disrupting compounds? You're going to hear about them now. So for myself, Judith Zelikoff, a professor in the Department of Environmental Medicine, and my community engagement coordinator, Kruna Shah, we'd like to introduce Dr. Gasabian, who will talk to you about endocrine disruption. So I think we'll just do this informally, Akgar, and we'll bounce off some questions. Also, I'd like to make sure that I invite everyone who's listening in to put questions into the chat, and I will make sure that Dr. Gasabian hears those questions and addresses them for you. So please, this is meant to be an interactive session, and I'm sure many of you, once you hear what endocrine disrupting compounds are, you're going to be very interested in knowing how safe you really are in your own home. So, Dr. Gasabian, can you tell us about what is an endocrine disrupting compound and why should we care?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Judy. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. Yeah, let's just start with first endocrine system. What is endocrine system and what are hormones? And then we get to endocrine disruptors. So endocrine system is a series of glands in our body. Judy mentioned thyroid is one of them. And these glands, they produce and they secrete hormones, molecules in our body that target several organs for important physiological processes. For example, growth, metabolism, reproductive function. And the whole system is in very, very precise balance through a feedback system. So whatever we experience in life, they are really under very, very meticulous control in our body of these molecules that are circulating in our body. But there are external factors that can interfere with this system. And these are endocrine disruptors. So these are chemicals, most of them synthetic, man-made, but not all of them. Some of them are natural, that they interfere with the system. And that can happen at several levels. That can happen at the level of producing hormones, at the level circulating hormones in the body, or competing with them to influence the target organ, for example, the liver or the brain, and sometimes the metabolism of the hormones in the body. So these are endocrine disruptors, and through influencing the endocrine system, the hormones, the sex hormones, thyroid, they can make us sick by influencing several organs. We can get to that as we talk more.
Sorry. So what are some, this mute, right?
Yeah.
So what are some hormones that we might know about?
Yeah, I think you've heard of thyroid. So sometimes you go to your physician, they ask for a blood work and they check your thyroid level. Thyroid level is important for several aspects of our body. Like when we are a small child, it's important for brain development. For adults, it regulates sleep and metabolism and several other functions. You might have heard of sex hormones that are important for puberty, for menopause, for reproduction, and these chemicals can interfere with the function and production of these hormones.
Excellent. So things like estrogen and testosterone and
these are sex hormone. Yeah, so these are sex hormone, and in men and women, they influence different function. For example, a young girl, when they start puberty, for when it's time to when they want to have babies, so the time to pregnancy is a factor that is defined by our sex hormones when we are trying to have babies. So and the list goes on, and many of them are also influencing other diseases like obesity or cancer or diabetes. The more we study, the more we know about the effect of these endocrine disruptors on our health.
So it seems to me that these endocrine disrupting compounds, and I'd like you to name a few if you can have really serious health effects. You interrupt the pancreas function, you wind up with diabetes. You interrupt the ovarian function and hormones, you can wind up with infertility. Can you talk to us about some of that?
Absolutely. And I like to start with naming some of those, because by knowing the name, we can also talk about the specific effect on specific organ. One group of chemicals or endocrine disrupting compounds are flame retardants, brominated flame retardants. These were used for years in products, in furniture, in electronic devices that we all have in our houses, and that's how we get exposed to them. And then years of research in animals and humans have shown that these chemicals influence brain development of the fetus. So when children are still in the womb, they can be affected by the harmful effect of flame retardants. And that's one of the reasons that, for example, Environmental Protection Agency, other policymakers eventually decided to stop using them in our household products. Another group of chemicals are endocrine disruptors, or phthalates. These are used as plasticizers. We have them a lot around us because they are used in food packaging. They are used in flooring the houses, and again, we are exposed to them because they are in the air. We eat the food that is contaminated with them, and again, many years of studies in animals, in humans, have shown that phthalates can influence sex hormones and lead to a lot of abnormalities in the sex and reproductive system. For example, influencing the time of puberty, influencing, as you mentioned, infertility is one of the outcomes. And then for many other chemicals, we know that they can be carcinogens. So I think it's a very good source of information for everyone, is looking at the list that are put out there by the CDC and the EPA about these chemicals that can be carcinogen. Many of them are not in use in this country, but we know that they are some of them are really here forever. They came to stay because they do not metabolize in the environment or in human body. And we like, I think some people might have heard of the forever chemicals because of the movie that was made about them. So PFAS, that are called forever chemicals, are another group of endocrine disruptors that are of concern because they do not, disappear from the environment. They are not in use anymore since early 2000, but we still, if you look at like different individuals in this country, almost all of us, we have traces of these chemicals in our body, and that's concerning.
So, given the fact that they're so widespread and still being used and still being manufactured, and we all have some level in our body, should we be concerned that some agents may be cancer causing? I mean, all of us, every single person is certainly not going to get cancer, but how should we handle it? How should we avoid some of these chemicals, and what can we do to get rid of some of the chemicals in our bodies now? Is there anything?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And back to your point about not everyone with the exposure to these chemicals get cancer, I like to remind everyone that we want to be a healthy population. For us, it's important to be healthy as a society. I think COVID was a good reminder for us that it's important to be a healthy society, more important than being a healthy individual, or at least as important as being a healthy individual. So these chemicals might not necessarily translate one to one by cancer in me, but I think we want to reduce or minimize exposure in everyone, and especially in groups that they are specifically vulnerable, like children or pregnant women. So I like to put these preventive measures in two categories. A few things we can do as individuals. How can I reduce my personal exposure when I'm home? What can I do? I think there are ways that we can do. Some of them are very simple. For example, if I'm vacuum cleaning in the house, if I open the window and allow for air to circulate in the house after every time I clean, I let some of these cancerous chemical get out of the house. So outside of the air that I breathe. The other thing I can do is that if I have old furnitures that they have some materials, the foam inside is exposed, that we know that old time they might have used some of these, harmful chemicals. At least I cover them, or if I can, I change the furniture. A few other things I can pay attention. I can replace plastics in the house by other types of food packaging. For example, in my house, I prefer to use a mason jar rather than anything else. Like instead of putting something in plastic and then in the fridge, I put it in a mason jar. Another source of exposure to these chemicals are canned food. Sometimes we do not have another option, but many times there is an alternative and we can reduce the use of canned food. Sometimes you can pay attention to some signs. For example, I printed something for everyone here. So at the bottom of every container, plastic container, every plastic product, you will see numbers that they appear like in this shape. You can avoid the ones that they are marked with number 3, 6, and 7 because these are chemicals that by regulatory agencies are known to be carcinogens. So we try to avoid them. I have a container of tablets. It's very small, that's why I printed, but you will find it here at the bottom, the number, and you can pay attention to those things. So I think I like to call it being more informed rather being concerned, because by more information, we can reduce our exposure. But that's at the personal level. I also like to talk about what can we do as a society, and that's by being informed and having demand from our policymakers that that they should pay attention. That's why we need regulations, how to minimize at least exposure contamination in drinking water. As a personal level, I have no control in the water in New York City or upstate New York, but we know that there are industry, contamination happening in some part of the state, that we can demand our policymakers that this needs attention, and that's, I think, on us to demand and ask those who are in charge to take care of that. Also, to ask them to do more research about that, or being accountable for what is out there. I think everyone should be accountable for if there are harmful chemical in the society produced by them.
Thank you. That was a very, very good question, very good answer. So why aren't these banned in our country?
Many of them are. So it's, as I mentioned, for example, the brominated flame retardant is not in use anymore. So for some of them, the concern is that they are really persistent. So they do not disappear from the environment. They're in the soil, in the water, and that's how we get exposed to. That's one problem. The other problem is that these chemicals, sometimes when a group of chemicals is banned, they are immediately replaced for another group of compounds that they might have the same concerning effect. I have to admit that I understand that some of these chemicals are really helpful to making our life easier. I mentioned phthalates as a group of concerning chemicals, but they're used in as plasticizers in many hospital equipments, and we need them. So that's, as a society, we need to come with good replacement, not harmful replacement for these chemicals, because just by banning them, we have to think, okay, why am I using as a plasticizer now? Or how can I protect, in terms of fire or other concerning, environmental factors that were by initially the reason that we came up with this chemical. So it's challenging, but I think we are coming with tools and methods by finding new chemicals that can be like a replacement for these harmful chemicals, and also studying whatever is out there to make sure that they are not harmful and or have impact on health.
So I'd like to remind everyone that we are taking questions from those of you who are listening, and we would appreciate any questions that you may have. Just put them in the chat, and we'll make sure that Dr. Kasabian talks about it. So do I now get rid of my Teflon cookware that slides out so easily? Do I not have my couch treated with flame retardant or anti-stain? Do I not buy baby bottles? How do I move forward with this? They're everywhere.
They are everywhere. So that's why I think, in addition to this personal level actions, we need policy level action. So it's what you mentioned is very, very correct. So Teflon is a good example, because it's okay, that's easy. I can move from non-stick pan to maybe stainless steel, or I don't know, Dutch oven or other things that they are now in the market. But sometimes it's also, if there is no control at a broader level, it might be harder for individuals, because if you pay attention in the market, you see that there are products that's written PFOA free or PFAS free. But what is in there in replacement of PFAS that make it still non-stick? And I think we as individual, we should take care of ourselves. We should take care of what is inside the house, as you mentioned. These are all actions that we do, but there should also be, in general, like easier, better way for people to have a healthy life. Like, I want to be able to eat fish that is not contaminated by PCBs, an important, again, endocrine disruptor that we know it influences and is toxic for brain development. So I think it's every individual's right to have access to food and water that is not contaminated. And we do, as individuals, we try as much as we can, but we also requires action on at the larger level, I think.
What we find in general is that marginalized populations, underrepresented populations, are harder hit by most toxicants. And because for one reason that they're there where they live, where they play. Is there a consideration for these same types of endocrine disruptors associated with populations more so than other populations?
Absolutely. I think the same concern exists here, similar to other pollutants like air pollution. Now we know that influences marginalized population more. The same is absolutely correct for phthalates or other endocrine disruptors. And that's, that's what we discussed in the context of environmental justice, because we want to create a healthier environment for everyone. And unfortunately, those that they are suffering from other risk factors, other, adverse environment, they are also exposed more to contaminants, and that's the case for endocrine disruptors.
Yeah, so when you're thinking about fast food and plastic wrappers, should I stop putting my plastic containers in the microwave? Should I, there's so many things to know that we need to be aware of, that we're inadvertently exposing ourselves.
Absolutely, that's true. That's true. That's why what if we just use glass container, and not a plastic wrap, but a glass Tupperware at home for organizing our fridge. I mean, it's better for the environment not to use. It's one thing is keep us healthy, but also we want to keep the environment. And today is Earth Day, so that's a good reminder that we have something to care about, that is also like our planet, and using something that also is less harmful to the environment. It's also going back to us. It's going to help us staying healthier. And the use of for example, glass container instead of single-use plastic is going to keep us healthier. It's going to keep the environment healthier. So that's something that we can do, and it is in our hand.
This has been very exciting. Are there any, I don't see any questions popping up in the chat. So I'm going to ask you, Dr. Kasabian, if you have anything that you would like to close this very exciting and somewhat scary topic with.
Yeah, I'd like to finish with the importance of this topic for vulnerable groups, and most important children, because that's the area I work on and as I really care about, because I think that's the future of our country. So we should specifically pay attention to exposure to young children and protect them from harmful effect of, in general, environmental toxicant, and in particular endocrine disruptors, because we want them to have a healthier brain and healthier body for a better future. And for that, we can start with minor steps. Everything starts with a step, and we can do it at home and then take it to the higher level.
Okay, so please join us again next month when as I said, we'll be talking about vaccines and demything vaccines and what's the right one. Is there a right one? On our YouTube Live. And I'd like to thank Dr. Kasabian for her chat with us today, and of course Krina Shah for helping me navigate social media. And thank you, and we'll see you next month, I hope. Bye-bye.
Thank you.